you know, all this wasn't done just by dovetail. I mean, we did the overall stuff. And Bob, why don't you come on up here now? And because otherwise I'll talk too much, and even though I don't have PowerPoint slides. You know, Dylan had a number of different subcontractors and organizations that he had to work with. Okay, so Dylan, why don't you come up and just a little bit as far as the kind of give him a little bit of the kind of the phases of what we did, and then Bob will get into the actual detail on the structure. Okay, just so you kind of get that, and then I don't mean to make you do. He's not a sales side, marketing side. He's a project manager. Okay, right, so yeah. He's very nervous. Okay, but at the same time he's very good. Okay, and he's one of the best craftsmen in the area in his
Thank you, appreciate it. Yeah. So yeah, this was a pretty challenging project. And the challenging ones are a lot of fun, so this one was a really good time. Some of the challenges we faced were that we started in the winter. So we were pouring concrete in January, which is, you know, adds a whole new layer. And then we were setting steel in February. But some of our local contractors that we worked with, Williams Concrete and Kelly Steel Erecting, were fabulous. In fact, I went out of my way to call the president of Kelly Steel to tell him what a great job they did, because they were just phenomenal. And then it became more of our people on the ground, and we hired some new folks from within the area, and everything went fairly well. We had a couple of hitches here and there with some of the roofing material and installation and weather, but for the most part, it went really well. And it was about 6 months all told. So, and one of the key people was Bob Pagnato, and let you take it from there.
Yeah, so Bob is the company that basically we partnered with that actually did they work with us on the design level, and then they take the overall conceptual design and they get down into the engineering shop drawings and all that stuff to actually build it and do the structural analysis to make sure, you know, how many of these cross supports we need to do and how we're going to actually make this thing work. And then they on their turn subcontract to have the steel, you know, cut and fabricated and all that stuff. Okay, so Bob.
Okay, so we're going to talk about solar canopies today, and specifically the structure. I'm Bob Pagnato from Structural Solar, and as the name would suggest, and as Al has and Dylan have said, our specialty, or we specialize in design, build structures, specifically for the solar industry. And we do that across the country. We do it from New England to Hawaii. And I can tell you it would be really easy for me to talk about foundations and steel, and we can talk about that, and I can answer any questions you have. But I think it might also be kind of boring if we just talk about rebar and concrete and anchor bolts and those kind of things. So I wanted to maybe take a slightly different tack and talk about maybe the psychology of a structure and why do people do certain things, and it might be more interesting for you. So, you know, on just about every project, and I think you've heard today, there's canopy is one of 3 ways to install solar. You can do it on a roof, you can do it on the ground, or you can have a solar canopy. And we call solar canopies solar pavilions, solar carports. We have a lot of names for them, but they're all sort of elevated, permanent structures with solar on top. And solar canopies are, in my opinion, generally the default position. Somebody that's interested in, you know, there's always a fellow who inspires somebody to talk about solar, to consider solar. And I think that's Andrew in this case. And then it starts from there. And then generally speaking, somebody will go to the roof and they will determine that the roof is adequate or is inadequate for solar. And then they'll go to the ground mount and they'll look for areas where there's underutilized space on the ground. And then generally, if those aren't available, somebody will come to a canopy. And they'll look for parking areas, which makes perfect sense. But I will tell you, it's a more expensive proposition. You heard that today. There's foundations. There's a significant amount of money in foundations and in steel and in roofing. And there's an architectural element. So a structure like this is going to last for 40 years. It's going to last for 60 years. There's no reason why it can't last for 100 years, just like every other building, if properly maintained. So it's a long-term investment. Now, but here's what generally happens. Everybody's interested in a payback, and you can say carbon neutral. I mean, people want to be cash flow positive in the first year, and I think I think that's a healthy thing. I mean, I think we all have to strive to be more efficient, to get our costs down, to make renewable energy a mainstream technology, not a conservative, not a political thing, but to make it a mainstream technology. So we all have that obligation. But generally speaking, it's going to be a little bit of a stretch with a solar canopy. And so you have to ask yourself, how did that happen out there? How did it happen? And I'll tell you, and you've heard it in a couple of different ways here. It's usually there's a leap of faith and there's some inspiration. And somebody provided it. And I have to give all the credit in the world to Motorcars Honda, the management team, and to Andrew, and also to Dovetail Solar. Because there would have been a lot of opportunities here to just simply look at the numbers and say that doesn't work. But it took more than that. Somebody saw value beyond the PV. And the other thing that became apparent today is a lot of people don't see those types of intrinsic values or intangible values up front. They learn to recognize it later, which is a wonderful thing. I'm glad it's recognized. But for all of us on the front lines who are out promoting solar, or for those of you who are considering solar, for those of you who are supportive of solar, when it comes to any solar installation, but particularly canopies, there is a need to be inspired. There's absolute need to be inspired. You have to look for value beyond the PV. In this case, there was asset protection underneath. You heard that today. There is an outdoor showroom that didn't exist before, that exists today. There is certainly the renewable energy credits and the depreciation and all of the things that contribute to an internal rate of return. And by the way, I think solar is underappreciated when it comes to internal rates of return, because on just about every investment, and that's what a return will do, it'll tell you where your next best investment dollar is spent. But with solar, as long as you believe the sun is going to come out tomorrow and the utility rates are not going to go down, then you should technically risk affect that, because it's not subject to competition and it's not subject to management. It's going to just happen on its own. So I always encourage, everything else being the same, to err on the side of solar. Now, I guess if I wanted to just make a final point or two. It's always, and I'm going to wrap it up, but it's always about solar is always about a dollar and cents issue, as it should be. There has to be a payback to it. But at the end of the day, you have to have faith, you have to have inspiration, you have to look for reasons to support the investment. And you have to look for reasons to support the companies that make that investment. I mean, we are extremely grateful to Motorcars, to Dovetail Solar, to be a part of the project, to the bank for being a part of that. But I can tell you, I speak on behalf of the people who rolled the steel, fabricated the steel, painted the steel, did the steel erecting. There's a lot of local jobs that were created as a result of this. And I think we owe those companies a great deal of gratitude for investing in the project. And so that's where I would leave it today. And thank you for your time. Steel in this structure, and that does not include the roof. Dylan, you probably had 1-2 truckloads of steel, so you could add another 20 or 40 tons to that. 80% of the steel, depending on where it's melted and that kind of thing, comes from recycled content. The steel tubing can be made in a lot of different states, but it was all U.S. origin. Fabrication came out of Columbus, Ohio. There's in one of the videos, there's a whole fab shop team there that's in the photo. The steel erecting came locally. I'm sure a lot of the concrete work was all done locally. Dylan handled a lot of the labor to install the roof and the modules. So it really is a community project, and I think that needs to be recognized in one way or another.
How much steel?
About 120 to 150 tons overall. 80% recycled. Yes.
How heavy is the single panel that you're?
The solar panel itself?
Yes.
The solar panel weighs about 45 pounds.
So the question was, what does a solar panel weigh? And it's 2 to 3 pounds per square foot, maybe 40, 50 pounds overall. And a structure like this has to be designed to support not only the snow loads and the wind loads, but the weight of the solar panels and people standing on it and those kind of things.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it.
Okay.